Today on the podcast, we have Rich Ryan and Ryan Kent, and we're talking what it takes to be a competitive hybrid athlete. What's up, boys?
Dude, thanks for having us, man. Stoked
Absolutely.
to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Appreciate it. Really looking forward to chatting.
We had a nice 9-mile run this morning.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just the best way to just kick things off, get a little bonding experience, doing a little fitness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Felt like cross-country practice.
it did.
Just out
Especially
there.
with like all the other people we saw out there running, groups of like high school kids, college, pro runners. And it's like still dark. Like that part was crazy to me. Like everyone's up and at it bright and early here in Austin. I don't know if that's to beat the heat or if that's the culture or what it is.
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, that's one of the things I love about the city, and I say that often, but it is filled with committed individuals who, even if they are not professional athletes, they treat their sport, their hobbies, their passions like they are a professional athlete. And I respect that.
Absolutely.
And it matters. I've been in communities or areas where I've lived in where I felt isolated, right? Where I was doing the thing and I felt I was the only one on the planet who did this. So being around something like even being in Colorado and being here, it just feels so much more inclusive and just validating of the effort that we're putting in, you know?
Yeah.
That's why when we walked in the building this morning, I was like, I haven't even been here a day yet, and I'm already feeling inspired by the people that we've like come across already.
Yeah. It's a cool spot.
Pretty
It's a
cool.
cool
I
spot.
appreciate it, guys. We got a full day of training, full day of eating.
Yeah.
Kent, you're falling behind on your calories a little bit.
Dude, I was
gotta
waiting
call
for you to
out.
say, listen, I was waiting for him to say something because you gave us the breakfast after the run.
Didn't eat it. It's like, no
Didn't eat
thanks.
it. And now he prepped lunch for us. And I didn't eat it.
Didn't eat that.
So I was just waiting for Nick to call me out on that one.
I care about your progress and your fuel and your gains.
Oh, I've been eating. You just don't know what I've been eating. Candy bars.
I
Coke Classic.
saw the Coca-Cola. Yeah, I did see the Coca-Cola. So I want to get into your guys' background in a little bit to provide context of where you're coming from. But I want to dive right into some HYROX specific stuff really quick.
Let's get to
Totally.
it.
What is the Elite 15 in HYROX?
You want to take that one?
Sure. So the Elite 15 is basically the pro track for competition in HYROX. They take basically your times from the general courses, and your top 2 combined times throughout the season will qualify you for an Elite 15 race. And through the 4 different majors, you can qualify to the Elite 15 World Championships. So basically, the Elite 15 is kind of a blanket statement to invite athletes into their qualification system. And then once you're in the majors, you can qualify for the World Championships. So it's basically an elite field of HYROX athletes. That's 15 people.
So when you are qualified into the Elite 15, are you then considered a professional HYROX athlete?
I don't think so. I mean,
The term they use is pro. It depends on what your idea of professionalism is, right? Like, are we doing it exclusively? Like, no.
when I think of pro athlete, I think of, are you supporting your life off of
right.
sport? And I don't think everyone in the Elite 15 is doing that.
Definitely not. But is it at the pinnacle of the sport? Is that what you consider pro? Then yes. But is it going to be able to sustain a lifestyle of professionalism? Like, no, not yet. For most of us.
Yeah.
How did you guys get into the Elite 15?
Well, I got into it by this year anyway. It's an interesting system that HYROX has, where previous results dating back to, I think, a full calendar year, if not more.
Sometimes more, but
A result that, so I'm currently, I'm in the Elite 15 for the 2025 HYROX season, simply based off a result that I got at one of the majors last year in Chicago of November of 2023. I won that major. If you win a major, you're automatically into the Elite 15 for the following season. So I haven't had to go out searching for races to find fast times to get me into the Elite 15, because I was fortunate enough to win one of the majors last year, which auto bid me into the next season. Whereas Rich has not had that luxury.
So last year I had to qualify through a major. They took the top 3 with a roll down to 5 in each of these majors. So I qualified. I finished 3rd at the North American Championship in DC to get me into World Championships. But I don't have an auto bid. So now I'm still fighting to get my time back into that Elite 15 based off times.
Got you. Okay.
Which
is hard.
It's a slippery slope too, because HYROX is trying their absolute best to standardize these courses across the globe, whether they come here to Austin and set up an event in the Austin Convention Center or they're in Hong Kong, setting up event. Like, they do their best to make these courses as similar as they can, but in a lot of cases, there's just things that you can't predict, and the surface of the floor, which changes the friction of the carpet with the sleds, and there's a lot of.
It's also getting more competitive.
Yeah,
it's just the growth is explosive. The availability to train for this is broad, so it brings in a lot of different athletes. So it's getting better. Like, people are just really bringing it to these courses.
The level. I mean, when we first started, I did the first HYROX that was in the United States in 2019. It was in Miami, and it's crazy. Like, I think they only had like 400 people at that first event in Miami. I mean, I would consider it a huge fail, but like HYROX they had a plan, and now it's cool to see events hosting, in the UK, like 10 to 15,000 people. They're pushing through an event in a weekend.
That is crazy.
Whereas 5 years ago, I mean, you'd walk into one of these convention centers and you'd be like, what's going on? And
13,000 in Birmingham.
Yeah,
just this past weekend.
It's crazy.
What were your times when your first
oh my God
HYROXs compared to what's your best times now?
What was your first time?
My first one was an hour 7.
Mine was 2.
Hour 7.
67. What took you? Now, you got blown up on wall balls?
I got blown up on wall balls. My first wall ball experience took me almost 8 minutes to do 100 wall balls.
How are you breaking those up?
I think towards the end, it was maybe 2 or 3 at a time. Yeah, but it was one of those things where I knew that if I devoted time and took this seriously, that I could be very, very good at it. And I went all in, man. Like, I wanted to be a professional athlete, and I put all my eggs in one basket, and I dove in head first, man. And thankfully it's worked out for me so far.
And
what's your current PR?
Oh, okay. So my started out at almost 68 minutes, and now I ran a 55:12 last year.
Yeah, so I'm 58:11 or 13 or something like that.
So I'm pretty much like done with wall balls before Rich even gets to the wall balls.
Happened once.
So obviously the sport is evolving pretty quickly. Where do you anticipate we see HYROX times in the next 5 years?
I mean, the world record right now is 53 low.
Is that Hunter?
That's Hunter. And there was 2 athletes just recently, Alex Ronkovich and James Kelly. They ran like 54s. It's going to come down to the running, how fast people can run.
I was going to say, where do you find time?
It's the run. It has to be. I mean, there's some space on the sled push and pull. That seems to be the place where you can gain the most time. And how well you can recover from that and continue to still run well. But I don't know, 50, 51.
I think someday someone will break 50. I think that's
I haven't run the numbers on that,
possible.
What that looks like what that run pace would have to be. Is that like 5:15s? Yeah, of course it's possible. But right now guys are running like 5. If you're running 5:30s in between, you're the fastest runner. So if you can break it to 5:15s, 5:10s.
I mean, it's all percentages, right? Like, you think about the event as a whole, the running. So each 1K run, it adds up to about 50% of the competition. But the ski erg, you need to train it, but like the ski erg is only 3% of the race. The sled push is 3% of the race. The burpees are 3 or 4% of the race. It's the running is what you spend the most time doing. So that's where you're going to be able to just maximize your either your potential to get faster, or if that's something you need to work on, that could go the other direction as well.
I think about that during a lot of these training sessions where I'm spending a lot of time on the ergs. And if I'm doing a workout that's 5 to 6K of skiing or 5 to 6K of rowing, I then think back to, well, it's only that 3% of the actual competition. But my thought process is this is a way to build aerobic capacity and conditioning without trashing the legs and lower body. Is that the same way you guys view these ergs?
Yeah, pretty much exactly. Like you still get the aerobic fitness in these like cross training modalities. You might not get 1-to-1 better in running, but you can definitely improve how well you can deliver oxygen and just the whole aerobic capacity piece. And it's just like for the recovery part of it, like there is a big high volume sport. So being able to bounce back, it's easier on the ergs. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that no impact, the range of motion is fixed. So you can't really do as much damage as running. And that's another reason I think that it will continue to improve what people can do in terms of their aerobic capacity, how big they can build it, because they can recover so much better. Kind of like triathlon, you can spend so much time on a bike and just build this huge engine. I feel that same way about HYROX, like with the ski, the row, even the bike, I think translates pretty well.
And what the machines can do that running can't do is it can build power. And I think ultimately the HYROX event is just how much power can you sustain for the duration of the event. So working the ergs just kind of builds up your power output as well.
I heard you guys refer to this term recently, stay power. I'd love to talk about that because I love that whole concept and just that term. And even since you guys have been here in Texas, I've heard you use that term, not just around training, but even around business. What is stay power?
So yeah, I mean, that's just how long you could sustain a high output, right? Just like without, just basically fatigue resistance is kind of how we think of it, and just being able to be a strong runner, a strong athlete, and being able to put out for a high ability, and just being able to kind of sit in it. It's kind of how I think of it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
One of the things I had to learn early on when I started training for HYROX is kind of how to use the ergs the right way. So I always do my run in the morning, whether that's just an easy run or a tempo workout, track workout. And then when I was programming my circuits in the afternoon on days that I had HYROX specific circuits, I was also adding in 1K repeats in almost every one of those workouts. And it was trashing me. I was running almost too much, too high intensity running. So I started subbing out of a lot of the running in the afternoon with more erg work. And I saw a huge difference in just my ability to recover, bounce back, and still get that aerobic conditioning work.
Right now, you're going through the exact same thing that we all went through, I think, when we first started training for HYROX. It's finding the formula, the right balance of how much running versus how much strength versus how much specificity. And you're going to mess it up a few times before you can find out what works for you. And it is very subjective, like how much Rich can do is not going to be how much I can do versus how much you can do. Like everyone's got their little way of doing things. And I think that's also a really cool thing about HYROX is there's not this one blueprint on how to get results. It's what works for you, because let's just say a power athlete, they're probably not going to need to, or a strength athlete, they're not going to have to spend as much time lifting the weights. They need to be out there working on their running ability.
Right.
Whereas someone who is maybe a little thinner, they're a great runner, but they need to build strength. They're obviously going to spend more time lifting weights and doing those things. So it very much depends on the individual and what their strengths and weaknesses are as an athlete.
Do you think you'll keep the ergs if you go back to the roads? Are you gonna keep that as part of the routine?
That's a good question.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I used to hate the ergs. And I think it's because I didn't spend enough time on them or learn how to use them properly.
There's a muscular point too that just is so limiting when you start. Especially in the ski, the row, I find that too. It's I will crap out muscularly first because I'm not conditioned and I'm not putting in the volume that I put on the runs. So it just feels kind of torturous at first. And then you get your form down. Is that what happened? Did you just like kind of dial it in?
It just clicked eventually. Like one of my favorite workouts that I love and hate is 10 500-meter repeats on the rower, 60 seconds rest in between, trying to hold very consistent paces. Like I look forward to that workout, but I also dread it every single time.
You crushed that, by the way. I saw that YouTube video where you did 10 by 500 row.
They hit 136.
Yeah, I mean,
That's nasty.
insane.
Were you feeling it in like your glutes? Was it
my
muscular?
My glutes were on fire.
It's so painful. Like, have you done like a 5K on a row?
No, but I've done a 2K.
2K is miserable. But
Yeah.
a 5K at like 3K for me, I'll get on there and my glutes will be on fire. Like I can't go anymore, and I still have to sit there and do 2 more K. But it's like that terrible feeling that just
I can't sit on the row for more than 10 minutes at a time, and then I need to move to the next, whether it's the ski or the bike or go run and then come back to it. I have a hard time sitting on the row unless you put a pillow under my ass or something.
10 by 500. That's
Yeah,
It's
after
worth
like rep 5, I have to just like stand up during that 60 seconds and just move some things around.
I mean, dude, that's a workout. Your power output's gonna go through the roof.
And that's one thing with the ergs too, is that like Brian said, with the PowerPoint of it, like I've gone back and forth of the best way to kind of approach this for HYROX in particular. And at first I was like, maybe I'll just treat it how I treat running, where it's like anaerobic threshold, something you can kind of sit in for 45 minutes, something like that, and doing repeats with short rest, like longer repeats with short rest. And now I'm kind of thinking it is taking it a little bit further, so you do get that power output benefit from it, and you still, you might be touching outside of anaerobic threshold, but you're still building a huge aerobic engine with that stuff. So I think I'm leaning more toward the higher end for the machines lately anyway.
Right. It seems like you guys complement each other really well in terms of, we were talking about this morning, like an objective perspective and a subjective perspective.
Yeah.
Like Rich, you seem like you like are really into the numbers and the data and then programming based off that data. And then Ryan, you're more like,
This feels
Feel,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
Definitely. RPE.
totally agree with that.
yeah.
Right. And that's why I think it does work really well. It's like, I might be able to come with like a hard reason, and Ryan will come and be like, well, this is how this feels, and this is how it feels after I do it for X amount of time. And it just like makes things really well rounded in terms of like trying to figure out how to connect with people with our programming and things.
do you look at any data?
I do. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm like, I don't pay attention to it.
He writes his workouts down in a journal on paper, like every day since he was like 8 years old.
I have years and years of just like a pile of just spiral notebooks that I write in my training like every day.
Do you go back to them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if I'm in a funk or something and I need to look back on just like, man, I had that one race back in 2021 that I absolutely crushed. Like, what was I doing in that buildup for that race? All I have to do is go to my 2021 notebook, flip open to that week, and I can literally look at the data of like what I was doing. So in that regards, I use it almost on a daily basis. But when it comes to like training, I think just because I started at such a young age, 4 years old, I started running competitively. I'm just so in touch with my body or not in touch, but in tuned with my body and like the signs that it's telling me. Like even in like the easy run this morning that we were doing, I'm constantly checking in with myself and like how I'm feeling. And I think a lot of people end up, they go for a run and they throw their headphones on or a podcast and they're not in tuned with what's going on internally. They're distracted by, whatever. And if you're trying to compete in a competition, I think whether you're competing at the elite level or you're just training for like the Christmas 5K, like you should be in tune with your body a little bit and listen to the signs that it's telling you. That's going to be your best way to make adjustments on the fly. Because sometimes you could look down and your heart rate could be low and it feels like you're working way harder than what your heart rate's saying, or it could be vice versa. So sometimes it's not to be trusted. At least I think that way, because I'm like, I don't care what the heart rate says. I care how I'm actually feeling, So yeah, I mean, there's a time and a place for all the gadgets and things that, you know, are available for us today, but I'm so old school when it comes down to it. Even when it comes to like the shoes that I like to run in or race in, and I'm not big on the super shoes. I'm very much old school racing flats with, you know, not a ton of cushion. I like to feel the ground when I run. I don't need the springy pogo sticks bouncing me on my run. So I'm slowly coming around a little bit to some of the new technology because I mean, if it's there, you should use it, I guess. But
it's good to learn. It's good to know, right? If it's there and it's going to be helpful. So I like try to adopt stuff a little bit earlier and see. It's like, is this useful? But you got to be cautious. You know how stuff comes out and it makes promises, but yeah, for sure.
In the last couple of years of training, you know, obviously you're always testing and trying new things and just experimenting to get better, to improve. Is there one thing you could each share that might have been an unlock in the last couple of years of HYROX training specifically that has elevated you to another level of performance? Like, for example, I know Kent recently been talking about you now implement a full rest day as potentially pushing you forward, as hard as rest days are for a lot of us athletes.
That would be recent. That's pretty recent.
Committing to that.
Yeah. That one's recent. I think also I'm getting older. You know, I'm 38 years old. Still feel like I have a lot of years to give. But we don't recover as fast as we did when we were in our 20s. So giving myself that one rest day, at least for me, is a way to let my body absorb the training as it's happening rather than waiting for a taper to just hopefully absorb the months and months of training. But as far as like in the last couple years,
yeah, what do you think has worked? I always think the thing I'm doing now is the thing.
right?
And so I have a hard time not like throwing out all the past stuff, but like looking
Like
back.
recency bias.
Right.
Totally. So I'm always like, but the proof is in the results. So yeah, what do you think in the like?
The thing that's coming to mind would be like really not getting away from VO2 max efforts, even for HYROX training, where it's pretty much an aerobic event. Still doing zone 5 efforts through metcons, whether that's, you know, machine. I mean, it could be machine work. It could be, you know, an EMOM. It could be anything, but not just staying in touch with that top end, like heart rate. That way, you know, I don't know. There's been times in a HYROX race where the sled maybe you got to work it a little bit harder than you thought, and your heart rate bumped up 5 to 10 beats. You didn't expect that. If you haven't trained your heart rate in that appropriate zone, like it's gonna mess you up. So when I think back, the main thing would not losing touch with the top end. You know, it's very much, you can get caught in those zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, but don't forget about that zone 5. That's valuable too.
What's a zone 5 workout look like for you? Like duration?
That would be shorter. Yeah, maybe like 25, 30 minutes tops.
With rest though.
With rest.
Yeah.
With rest. And maybe only, I mean, it could be anywhere from a minute to 4 minutes in duration. And then having almost like equal rest. So if you do like a big 4-minute high output, you would then also recover for 4 minutes, you know, which that doesn't seem very specific to what we're doing in the event where we get no rest breaks, but
can move the needle.
It can move the needle.
Moves the needle pretty quick too.
Are you spending those, say, 4 minutes on like an echo bike?
No, it could literally, I could say, I'm going to do a minute of burpee broad jumps, right into a minute sled push, right into a minute of lunges, right into a minute of wall balls. And I'm going to send it, each one of those for a minute, and then take a 4-minute rest, something like that.
And then repeat that multiple times.
Repeat that.
Have you done any VO2 stuff on the row or you probably get there into zone 5 in that 10 by 500, but if you ever do like, I did a workout the other day that was 4 by 4 minutes on the ski erg.
I saw that.
Just as hard as I could go, and it was miserable, and I just blew up really bad. But I was like chasing the feeling of what we want to get out of that effort. Have you ever done anything like that?
No. And like, I've thought about that recently as I've watched some of your training. And that's why I've shifted some of mine to go after some of this more higher output work. because a lot of my training up until this point has been like high effort, big volume. But I think sometimes the volume was a little bit too large where the intensity couldn't be great enough. Mm-hmm. So now I'm starting to rethink some of the things that I could change in the future to get to some of that zone 4, zone 5, really targeted work.
And that's where I've missed the mark in the past, right? On either ends of the side. Like I'll either lean too heavy into the volume or too heavy into the intensity. And where it really, what I think is, looking back on training now and where I currently am, is expanding the volume first and then filling in the intensity later and trying to expand on that intensity within the base that I've built, right? So being able to hold that higher effort for a longer duration, because it is 60 minutes of pretty high output, right? If you really want to, like the guys who are running the world records, when Kent's running 55, it's like you're putting out almost from the start. And you got to find that line right where you can go as hard as you possibly can before you pop. So spending time there and building that volume right below that line, I think is really important.
It's interesting because in a running race, and you would know this doing many road races, you can kind of build into the effort. And like when you get to that point where you're like, okay, we're there. Let's just sit here and that's just where we're going to be. Whereas in HYROX, there's like this ebb and flow with, the effort and the heart rate. It's not like this, let's go pin it at 155, 160, and we're just going to sit there. This thing, you might have your heart rate 130, 160, 170, 150. Like it's kind of all over the place. So that aspect of it needs to be trained as well. Getting comfortable with like having these ebbs and flows of effort within like a training session, which I know you've been doing more of recently.
A buddy of mine once said that HYROX, it's an hour-long race, but it feels like the second hour of a 2-hour race, right? Yeah, there's no like gradually getting into it, like in an hour race or a half. Like you just kind of get into like this discomfort and you kind of hang on for like the last third. This is just like uncomfortable.
It's like the last 10 miles of a marathon.
It's just
right from the jump.
It's uncomfortable right away. Yeah.
What events specifically within that race do you see your heart rate elevate the highest?
So I think traditionally, burpees broad jumps is going to be what jacks.
Yeah, I could see that.
What jacks a heart rate pretty high. For me on the sleds, my heart rate actually comes down. But what I think is happening, and our other partner, Meg Jacoby, she had been doing some lactic threshold training, and she tested her blood after the sled push, and he said the levels that she had was like 10 to 12 millimoles of lactate in that blood, which traditionally in like anaerobic threshold training would be like 2 to 4. So she was like well beyond.
Crazy.
So it's not really adding up the way it would in traditional endurance, where your heart rate might go up, your effort goes up, and then the lactate levels go up. On the sled, you're slowing the heart rate down, but you're like where you're creating this like acidosis is isolated in your legs, right? So that pops really high. So even though my heart rate goes down on the sleds, my RPE goes way up.
Yeah.
Because then like my general fatigue feeling and like the how you feel, it's kind of like inverse, which is strange. So I think by the time people get to burpee broad jumps after they do 2 sleds, now they're dealing with all this lactate and it's been 30 some minutes, I think that's where you really see like a big elevation in it.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like what I talked about in the podcast with you guys on your podcast is not what I'm nervous for, but what I'm anticipating is just figuring out how to pace this race appropriately based off of changes in heart rate and efforts between running and the stations, and just like figuring that out in my first competition, I think is going to be my biggest learning curve.
Mm-hmm. And you coming from, doing your marathon where you're hitting 550 splits or whatever, just like mile after mile. Don't be as conservative as maybe you think you need to be. Mm-hmm. That would be...
Just send it, dude. Just go for it.
I'm going to send it.
Just go for it,
Definitely
man.
send it.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
What do you think you're going to ski? Are you ready to talk strategy about this thing?
Ski is a trap too, by the way. The ski can be a trap.
In what way?
You're feeling good and you can just kind of go harder than you probably should.
I think you were telling me to do 10 seconds greater than my 500 meter 2K effort.
Yeah. 2K plus 10
would
be
safe.
Now, some of us, we play those numbers a little bit closer. You know, I've definitely been like 2K plus 4 in some races, and you come out of the ski like, might have worked that a little bit too hard. That run coming out is not, you know, it's taken 500 meters to flush out kind of what you just did, get your heart rate back down. So,
yeah, I guess it depends on how conditioned you are on the ski. Because 2K plus 4 would be aggressive. It's doable. The top dudes.
And you just finished that run, right? Like the first run, I mean, it's the first 3 minutes of a race, like you're feeling great. And then you stop and now you're on the ski and it's like, oh, I've got all this energy. And you could totally just get overzealous and push that ski way harder than you should. And then next thing you know, man, you're going backwards.
And where you make up time, like we talked about before, is the sleds. Like if you push and you gain 5 to 6 seconds on the ski, you might give that back plus some, or if you conserve, you can gain like 30 seconds on the push and pull because you have a little bit more juice.
I'm feeling strong on the ergs. I mean, I spent a lot of time on the ergs the last couple of months. So I'm feeling strong. I've done a lot of volume, a lot of work, and a good combination of volume and intensity. But we'll see.
Yes.
We're getting close. We're less than 30 days.
Dude.
It is.
We are, man.
All right. So I want to know, in your guys' opinion, you asked me this before. I want to ask you this. What is a hybrid athlete?
Yeah, I mean, off the cuff, I mean, it's not something I sit around and think about like a ton. But I think it's someone who is putting themselves in the arena and they are testing themselves one way or the other. Like it can be a variety of things, but like you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your goals out there, you know, and you're, you know, going to a race or a competition or an event or something, and you're putting your training, the work that you've been doing, to the test. You know, a lot of people, we call them YouTube athletes. You know, they're just there for the clicks and the content. But like if you put them in an actual competition, they're not going to do anything at all. It's like what they're doing is really not that spectacular. It's just optics visually. And I think that's why when this conversation came out, you know, a year or two ago, and, you know, someone asked me about Nick Bear, and I didn't know a lot about Nick Bear. I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a YouTube athlete. Until I started doing more research, and I'm like, no, wait, this guy's legit, dude.
Putting in
like,
work.
He's
putting in work.
You know, I don't need to go over all the things you've done, but like, that's what I'm talking about, man. I think you need to put yourself in the arena and test yourself and be ready for success or failure. You know, like I think the term athlete means you are competing in something. If you are just training and exercising and working out, I don't think that makes you an athlete.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's where the competition side of it, where it's the term athlete for me, right? Like if you were to talk to someone who's working out.
Because the hybrid is a whole nother, like what does hybrid mean? That could go down.
But right, well then it's so broad. It's like, what do we even, like, is CrossFit a hybrid athlete? Like kinda, is like, yeah. But the, like if you went to a gym and everyone's training like bodybuilding, do you think they would call themselves bodybuilders? Or they would probably just call them, they probably wouldn't put themselves in any bucket. And even in the running world, I've found people have a hard time calling themselves runners. Have you come across that? It's like, I'm not really a runner.
For sure.
But I've done 10 marathons. It's like, you know what I mean? But I've done like marathons. Like you're definitely a runner if you've put yourself out there and done that. That's where I get kind of crossed up. If people are calling themselves hybrid athletes without the competition side, it's like, then you are just training a modality and like, that's fine. But I wouldn't necessarily attach the athlete like term to what they're doing. You know, it seems like the only place that has been doing that people kind of put themselves in this bucket when they're not competing, you know?
I think that segues well into each one of your backgrounds, because you both have experience collegiate athletics and then racing Spartan, DecaFit, obstacle course races. In your opinion, is HYROX, of all the things you've done, the pinnacle competition arena of hybrid athlete training and competition?
So far.
Currently?
Absolutely. So far.
And back when I was doing the Spartan racing thing from 2014 to 2019, which is when I got into, HYROX, I was training this way even for obstacle racing. Everyone's like, why are you doing bench press and deadlifts and all this strength training when like we're out running trails? We're doing 10 to 12 miles and 3,000 feet of vert. And it's like, dude, and why are you on the rower? Why are you doing all of these different modalities that maybe aren't going to translate onto the race course? Like you're way stronger than you need to be, but I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much, and it brought me just a lot of happiness, man. I love working out in the gym just as much as I love running. Like it's literally like a 50-50 love, for both ends. And
I'm the same way.
And so then when HYROX came about, man, it was like, oh, now I can still do what I love to do, train the way I want to train. And
more.
It's actually gonna, this is gonna translate on course. This is perfect for me. Cause Rich will say the same. We thought Spartan racing was going to be like, that was hybrid sports, like it's
the closest thing.
You got to be fast, you got to be strong. And maybe it kind of was in the beginning, and then it kind of went a different direction where, some of the things that would slow down a runner, like carrying a heavy sandbag up a black diamond ski slope, those things started going away. So, when HYROX came around, I was already ready to kind of make a transition out of Spartan. The timeline just worked perfectly with where I was at.
Was Spartan making these changes to make the sport and activity more approachable to a larger group of people?
I
think a lot of it.
They did have a thing where they wanted to be in the Olympics, and so standardization did become a thing. Mm-hmm. But they're an event company, right? That's where they're not a sport.
Yeah.
So I think it was just business. They just kind of looked at it. It's like, where is the sport side bringing us? And they had to endure COVID just like everybody else, and an event company took a big hit on that. And they just looked at it like, this is not a place where we need to invest. So I think it was more of a business decision, really, which is hopefully not something that will happen with HYROX. But just to circle back a little bit on that is, I think it's important to note that like the term hybrid does not necessarily mean like what we enjoy is events that are kind of running or endurance biased with some strength, because CrossFit has existed, right? And you could say that is also hybrid because they do everything, but it's strength bias, so that existed. Mm-hmm. But coming from an endurance background, like we both love running, we watch it, we still do it. We competed in that for a long time. We like that part of the aspect of competition. And that's where this HYROX really kind of like differentiated itself from CrossFit, because
one's focused on endurance and the other one's focused on strength.
Yeah, like to excel in the sport of CrossFit, you have to be really strong. In this, you have to be a huge aerobic engine, right? And they cross over a little bit, but the biases are tilted differently.
That's how I view what I do currently and how it's evolved, where it's endurance first and then strength always. And it's been this slow evolution where I look back at 2009, 10, 11, 12, when I first started getting really into fitness and building my body. It was just strength and bodybuilding. And I was running when I had to, because I was in college in the Army ROTC program. So I was just running because I had to run, because we were doing Army PT tests that I had to pass. And then slowly, a few years later, it was a 50-50 split between strength, bodybuilding, and running. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice body composition and strength goals to be a faster runner. And over the last couple of years, I've prioritized endurance, but strength will always support my endurance. But strength and bodybuilding in resistance training, being in the gym, that is no longer my priority focus. It is to support my endurance training. And I think that's why I've also aligned with HYROX coming out of a bunch of marathon and ultra preps these last couple of years, is because it does prioritize endurance, but strength is always a foundation of that endurance training.
Yeah.
Not one, one's not more important or better than the other. It's just kind of like what's your poison, I guess.
Yeah. So we like the running. We like the running part of it just because that is our background. We're fans of endurance sport. And so HYROX kind of just checked that box as well as anything we really could imagine. So we're fortunate that it came around. I mean, like Ryan said, we're the same age, just at the twilight of our athletic career, but at least we got it.
For sure.
At least we got a little bit of it.
How'd you guys meet?
Dude, it's kind of a funny story. Well, Rich, I didn't like Rich when I first.
I mean, you definitely have different personalities.
Yeah.
And I can see it like in the banter, which is almost like brothers. But I could see how maybe you guys started initially
like brothers too,
hating each other.
I didn't hate him.
Well, okay, I'll try to keep this story a little brief, but I had a baby during COVID. I didn't have a baby. My wife had a baby. We had a son. And when we had our kid, I took a little break from competing. A day turned into 2 days. 2 days turned into 3 days, turned into a week. A week turned into 2 weeks, 2 weeks into 3. Next thing you know, I haven't trained for 2 months.
At all, like not touching anything.
Nothing. And during this time, COVID's kind of, it's moving on. They're starting to put events back on. And Rich, during that time, was dominating all of the DecaFit events, which is another event cousin of HYROX, I guess you could say. And he's crushing it. But before I took, we had our kid, I was the man. Okay. So I took a break. I'm out of shape. And now Rich is the guy on the scene. He's winning all the races. He's the big name. So I'm just like naturally like, I don't like this guy.
I say nothing at all. I'm just handling my business.
Never had a conversation with him, but I'm like, he's
hints in the shadows,
taking my thunder. Like, I don't like it.
I get it.
And that honestly was like a big motivator for me to like get back in shape, was to try to like prove that like I'm still the guy. So that's what I did. I ended up, it was a rough comeback into fitness after taking almost 3 months completely off, but I eventually got back to where I was at, overtook Rich, was the man on the scene again.
For a very short time when the big race happened.
But ultimately we ended up meeting at a DECA event.
And I moved to Colorado. I was living in Philadelphia, and my wife and I got married and made the move to Colorado. Ryan was there at the time, and it was just kind of linked up. It was a HYROX where we like first met. Like we would correspond a little bit on Instagram, how people talk these days, And it was
just one thing. Like I was like, damn it, I like this guy. Yeah. Like we're gonna be friends. So like I wanted to hate him so much, but then when I finally met him, it was like, we're gonna be boys.
Yeah. So we started training together, and we travel a lot together, go to all the same races pretty much. Yeah, now business partners, doing the thing.
So it's only a recent friendship, actually.
Yeah. Last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I moved in 21 or 22. Moved out to Colorado.
Yeah.
Were you guys close to each other in Colorado, in proximity?
We're like 40 minutes apart.
Yeah, in Colorado, all the people kind of live in the same general area. It's like they move up, live close to the mountains, and then the mountains happen. And then, so everybody kind of lives in the Front Range. So it was like 30-minute straight shot.
Mm-hmm. And you guys just so happened to both race the 3,000 meter steeplechase in college?
Yeah.
Rich got me there.
Oh yeah.
Rich had a faster steeple time than me. I can give him that. But like you were saying last night, or was it this morning, that the steeplechase is kind of like the hybrid event
of
hybrid track and field.
Gets, yeah. Outside of like the decathlon.
For sure.
Right.
But I always thought it was so cool that like we had to do an endurance event and jump over these barriers and go through a water pit. Like that excited me. So I think even from, a much younger age, that style of training and event just always appealed to me. Something a little non-traditional, I guess you could say.
For anyone who doesn't know what the 3,000 meter steeplechase is, can you paint a picture of what that race looks like?
So the history of it, I believe, is from like equestrian sports, from horse racing. So they literally drag out big horse barriers. They're probably 6 inches wide, right? 6 inches like tall. Like the barrier's big. They don't move the way that the 110s or the 100 hurdles will like hit and they'll fall over. And then it's
did you see that guy eat it during the was it the Olympics?
Did you catch it? Did you watch any of the track and field in the Olympics?
I did, but I didn't see that one.
Oh my God.
So you can like they don't move these hurdles. Like they are like if you hit them, you go down.
Yep.
And then there's one part where they have a hurdle over a water pit for some reason, and you have to clear the water pit in the middle of the race. So you have to clear that 7 or 8 times.
There's 5 hurdles every lap, and you run the first 200 meters without barriers, and then from that point on, you have 7 laps, and every lap you have five hurdles, and one of those hurdles is the water jump. So you end up doing 35 hurdles, which is. By the end on your last lap, man, you can barely get your legs up.
I believe
over that thing, man. Toast. You're so lactic too from
it's a miserable feeling.
Like, it's not.
It starts out feeling good because you got to go a little slower than a typical track race, but by the end, it's not a feeling that is like any other.
No.
What even draws you to wanting to compete in that?
I never was like the fastest guy. Like I was decent, but I think the steeple is kind of where the guys either you have. I feel like it's just like you have talent, but you're never going to be the best at like the 5K or 10K or like the 800, 1500. So that's where they kind of send.
It's like you're not fast enough. Yeah. But there's also that different element. It's like, I believe I'm more athletic than these other runners. So that gives you a little bit of an advantage where the 15 or the 5K is just going to be output, little tiny guys just running around. So, yeah, it probably was a little bit of that. There's an opening, and you kind of have to be a little crazy to try it. Most people don't want to, so you just pop into it and give it a shot, and it's fun.
It's different. It's just so different.
Yeah.
I still remember, like, my coach was like, "Hey, we're gonna throw some hurdles into our 1,200 meter repeats today. I want you to jump over some hurdles." And I did it, and I was like, "Dude, this is fun." And next thing you know, like the next weekend, I was in the steeplechase. It was crazy.
That's wild. So I'd love to know from like your guys' perspective, being athletes for a long time now, how you've seen the endurance athlete, the typical endurance athlete evolve from what you might have experienced and thought an endurance athlete looked like when you were in college, and who people looked up to, who was aspirational in like that endurance space, and then what has changed over time and how we now view endurance athletes. Because I would argue that if you showed today's endurance athletes, HYROX athletes, for example, to people 20, 30 years ago, no one would say that's an endurance athlete. So how are you seeing the evolution of that?
So when I look at it, and I look at it at the like competitive level for just say, we'll talk about running on that end. I think the awareness, information, and education available around like nutrition and strength training is just so much more widely available and accepted that it's definitely changing the body composition of these athletes to look stronger, to look more healthy. And I think that is carrying beyond then. So then people aren't put into a certain box of a body type. Like you were saying, it's like, oh, everyone is small or is super lean. Now, even on the competitive side, athletes don't necessarily look that way because of the information that's available and because of the hardships of people of the past athletes, right? The stories that come out and the horror stories that people kind of endure because of this lack of information that they had when they were going through it.
And we all suffered from it.
Yeah, and we all went through it. We shared these stories before, and like just now it seems like there is an acceptance of it. Where before it's like, if you want to be fast, you have to run. You shouldn't, like, lifting isn't going to make you faster. It was kind of was kind of just like the tale we were told.
I mean, you don't touch weights when you're just focusing on running.
The word bulky.
Yeah, like I don't want to get bulky.
When you guys were in college, did you spend any time in the gym?
We went, but I didn't do really anything in there.
I did some stuff in the summertime. Our coach made us go. He didn't come, but he made us go. And then we just kind of like stood around, not on a program. And then we just like went running. So it was just like a time to meet up to run some more, but we didn't really have any guidance at all.
And you know something crazy is I'm sitting here in front of you right now weighing like 190, and my 5K time right now versus where I was at in college weighing $150, so a 40-pound difference. Dude, if I put in a 5K block right now, I could probably come pretty darn close to what I ran in college almost 20 years ago, 40 pounds lighter. So at some point, like it can become dead weight, but if you're able to use your muscle for power, you know, then I think it's great to have like extra muscle, you know, but the moment it becomes dead weight, you know, then you're not able to utilize that strength that you have. But I used to think it mattered, but I don't think it really matters so much anymore in terms of like the weight thing and how much muscle you have, because we're starting to see evidence across the world now of all these really high level athletes who are dipping their toes in both areas and are seeing like insane results from it.
I'm still taken back when I see people, like you're a good example, Nick, is in the split shorts, just being jacked, running around and running like runners did, like how runners run, just with the training. So I always think that that's interesting when people are stepping into that field and take it real seriously and not like wanting to worry about like the stereotype that came before them.
Right.
So it's still like kind of a transition for me, seeing people that are getting real into running.
Do you think part of that evolution, you guys briefly just touched on it there, is like maybe the spark behind the evolution is the understanding of proper fueling in diet and being a healthy runner, which then automatically creates bigger, stronger runners? Like when you guys were in college, what was the talk around nutrition and fueling, if there was any?
None. I don't think there wasn't any.
No.
There wasn't even like a resource for, you know, hey, like if you're dealing with something, eating disorder, whatever, like, hey, go talk. That stuff did not exist.
I think we had one like kind of group meeting with all athletes where they kind of
You were
like,
D1 though. I was D2.
That's true.
They're like,
Yeah,
we don't care.
But they just like put all the athletes in an auditorium and we're like basically kind of like food pyramid stuff, just general. And everyone just like, why do we have to be here? So no, we didn't get a ton of guidance. There was a point where I did reach out to my coach to try to get some help, because mostly on my end, it was mostly ridicule. Like I was dealing with some weight issues early, and the way I was told about it was basically just like being embarrassed in front of my teammates, you know? So when I went for him for help, he sent me to the physical trainer who like, you know, tapes your ankles, and they didn't know what to do either. And then it took a lot for me to even ask for help once. That's really not in my character. So then when it didn't come through, I just figured we'll have to deal with it on my own. So yeah, we didn't have any really like hard resources for us. I hope that there's more now.
Yeah.
And maybe just with the amount of information available through social media, through YouTube, and people can kind of do a little more self-study on it. But before it was like, yeah, just read a book or two, didn't really have any strong resources, and just made a bunch of mistakes.
Were you overweight and your coaches were encouraging you to lose weight?
Yeah. Encouraging is a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming there was like this expectation of like, hey, you have to get skinny. You have to stay skinny. Do whatever it takes to get lighter, to be faster. There was never a conversation about fueling your body to perform.
Right.
In fear of gaining weight.
And from the coach's standpoint, right, like I was underperforming and my body composition did have something to do with it, right? So he wants to get the most out of his athlete, and I was there on scholarship. So he's like, what's your problem? And I'm like, I don't really know how to do this. Can I get some help? And he's like, no, figure it out. So yeah, there's just not a lot there for us.
I was telling you last night, going into my junior year of cross country season in college, I lost 25 pounds over the summer, healthy, you know? And then when I got into the season, And my results were all of a sudden like the times were dropping like significantly. Like my 8K got better by like over 90 seconds. My 5K dropped by like 45 seconds. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is like the recipe for success here. I need to be light. I need to be thin. And then your body, I think, naturally wants to eventually get back to its homeostasis of like, what is your natural body weight? And for me, mine is like 175, 180, you know? So I could only sustain it for so long until you just can't anymore. And that's when like the eating disorders can pop up. And like it did for me.
Do you think endurance related sports naturally create unhealthy relationships with food? I feel like there are more people with unhealthy relationships with food who participate in endurance sports than there are who have healthy relationships with food, fully healthy relationships with food.
I wonder if it's just because everyone, I mean, what percentage of people do you think that are doing like endurance are doing it for the aesthetics?
Quite a bit. I mean, that's where my mind went too. It's like, is it the endurance sport that's creating the poor relationship, or is it the person who already has the poor relationship is more likely to lean toward endurance because of caloric burn?
It's a good observation.
Yeah. Right. So I think that it's hard to kind of untie the two. And I probably would think it's like, if I need to burn this many calories, I will do this much cardio. And then but on the other end, when you do a lot of output, it's hard to eat that much. I mean, it's been great being around you, seeing the way that you kind of operate in your nutrition. I've been taking advantage. Ryan has not decided to forego.
I might die in this workout.
Forego your hospitality on that. But yeah, it's also hard to fuel enough if you're not like locked in. But I probably think it's more the person who already has a poor relationship and is kind of drawn to endurance.
Gravitates towards that.
I think so.
Yeah, I've trained with a lot of different people, men, women, high-level athletes, people just getting started. And I'm always surprised how often I meet people who have really poor relationships with food and think lighter is better, and they will just bury themselves before even getting into a training session. Because I'll never forget this one day during this track workout. I've told this story multiple times before, but I was doing this track workout with this group of athletes here in Austin, and I was running with this female who was a really strong runner. She was struggling to keep up during the workout. And I asked, what did you eat this morning before the workout?
Nothing.
She said, nothing. And I'm thinking, well, I've already had 120 grams of carbs, at 6 a.m. I was like, well, what'd you have last night for dinner? She said, chicken and veggies. I was like, well, when's the last time you had some carbs? She's like, maybe yesterday morning, like my oatmeal and breakfast. And like that was an eye-opener for me of, okay, obviously this is why your performance is being affected and you're getting so upset because you can't perform, but you're self-destructing, like you're creating this environment and these conditions for yourself. How many other people are experiencing this same thing where you cannot even achieve your potential because you're not doing the bare minimum to fuel that potential?
And that's, like where to even start with that with just and this is something else what you're talking about with the education and what people are kind of knowing about it and the bad rap carbs have had in the past. It's coming around, right? I mean, it's probably been, that was maybe 10 years ago when everything was low carb. And I guess we're still kind of fighting it a little bit. But I remember I had a moment where I got a carbohydrate powder, just whatever from GNC or something like that, and put that in my water before my run after a long stint of being low carb. And the feeling that I had at the end of the run was just so night and day. It felt like I was like coming on and still having energy. And then that was just like the moment that clicked. It's like, oh, this is actually a tool I can utilize that's going to help me perform and not something that's going to like make me fat.
Yeah.
So I think we're coming around to that now.
I think most people just don't know. They're not educated in it.
It's a lot. It's like, where do you start? And trying to figure out where the right place to be, you should probably seek out help. You should probably get a coach or somebody that can help you figure out where your habits are and where to start on it all. But it's within your control. you can, and it's low hanging fruit, the nutrition part, especially
It's low hanging fruit. Yes.
especially for performance.
I mean, you were saying last night, you got back to your house and you were a little bit hungry before bed, and you went to the fridge and pounded some potatoes.
Yeah.
And got some carbs. Like you knew like today was going to be a big day, but you're educated and you know that. And I'm starting to get better at that. Like being like, okay, tomorrow morning I have a big volume workout. I'm going to need extra carbohydrates, extra calories. And, I try to set myself up for success. Haven't always been that way, but I am getting better. But I mean, even if I'm struggling with it,
You're also like the same thing that you mentioned. When I've learned this whole thing, it came from tracking and just like being meticulous. And that's how I learned. Like Kent is just intuitive. He like knows when he's hungry. He knows what to eat. And I think a lot of people miss that. They don't have that at all. Where you have it much like a little bit more like dialed in internally.
I'm learning a lot about myself through this podcast. It's very helpful.
This is actually an intervention.
Yeah.
That's how I learned actually nutrition as well, and how to manipulate my calories and macronutrients is through a very strictly tracking. Because I signed up for my first bodybuilding competition when I was in college. It was 2012. And I went to my nutrition teacher because I was studying nutrition in college. And the head of the dietetics department, I went to her and I said, I just signed up for a bodybuilding competition. Can you help me create a diet? And she said, I have no clue where to start. Because in college, we were focused on nutrition around disease intervention, diabetes and cardiovascular disease primarily. And it wasn't around performance nutrition or sport
Body
at all.
composition. Yeah.
None of that. So that's when I went online. And at the time, if it fits your macros, flexible dieting was really popular in tracking your nutrition. So I downloaded MyFitnessPal. I set my macros, made a plan. And over the course of like 16 weeks, I reduced primarily carbohydrates and fat, kind of like stair step down, reduced total calories, and then lost body fat. And that's where I learned how to track, how to manipulate calories, macronutrients.
It's pretty crazy.
And that was like that was an unlock for me in terms of, I can make these direct changes to my diet and see how it affects body composition. And then eventually it was, how do I apply the same principle to performance and making sure I'm eating enough and then adjusting primarily carbohydrates to fuel greater efforts and demands that my body requires.
Yeah, and unlock's a good way to put that. I was around the same time where I was looking for that. And I found it really challenging because everything I searched for before, it was like a method or like some rule, right? When it comes to dieting, where macros isn't really like that. It's like eat whatever you want, but as long as you're tracking these macronutrients, then you can manipulate it however you want. So I had a hard time grasping it because it was a little bit more obscure than just like, don't eat carbs or don't eat this food or just eat this food. And I found it really kind of challenging to understand like where I was supposed to go with this because there was no hard rule, Did you have a challenge like that with that or was it pretty intuitive on your end?
It was intuitive in the beginning, but it definitely messed me up because when I was like 14, 15 years old, I had a severe eating disorder. So when I learned how to track macros, that re-triggered this control that I wanted to have around food. So when my bodybuilding competition was over, I thought the next day I'd be able to stop tracking macros. And for years after that, I kept tracking things. Like if I said I was going to consume 300 grams of carbs in a day, it was 300. It wasn't 299. It wasn't like 301. Like I vividly remember this time in college where I made my entire meal. I weighed everything out.
Eating shouldn't be this stressful, guys.
It should not.
But it's also, but when it's control, it's like you hit it and it feels like less stress. Like I'm exactly where I need to be. I know exactly what's going to happen.
True.
The control part makes it feel less stressful.
Yes. So this time in college, I prepped my meal. I weighed it all out. I put it in MyFitnessPal. It was accounted for. I was walking back to my room to eat it. College apartment, living with 5 guys. I mean, shit all over the floor. I trip. I drop my food. It was like eggs, potatoes, cheese everywhere scattered. I picked up every piece of food,
Put it on the scale.
that on that plate, and I ate every bite. And me after that, I was like,
This was perfectly calculated.
it's like that was messed up.
That was a little crazy.
Messed up. So it's like it can be a blessing and a curse,
Right.
Because you can control this variable, but it can
Kind of open the door.
It can take over
Yeah.
the goal of what fitness and athletics and sports should be.
Is it something you think about like nowadays, or do you just you've done the numbers for so long that you just know like how many grams of carbs are in X? Like you just know, like you don't have to spend the time planning out what you're going to eat throughout the day. You already have a general idea.
I'll occasionally track just to like have an awareness, but it's maybe like once every 2 to 3 weeks. But now my diet's so consistent and I know what's in what that I can have a ballpark range.
Yeah.
And I know like if I'm putting a big effort out, it's like this intuitive, I should add some more carbs in around this training session. Or I should add some more carbs in post-workout to fuel. And then it's this subjective feedback loop where I'll wake up the next morning and I can tell if I under fueled the day prior, especially going into a big session. I'm like, I definitely like should have ate something else yesterday in preparation for this big day.
Yeah, I'm probably around the same kind of method now. I don't track often. And what I've found to be really helpful is that I started to understand what it felt like subjectively when I was fueled. And so that's a marker I can kind of aim for without having to track all the way there. Or before, where I would be under eating, I just thought that that's how I should feel. But when you eat more, you can kind of feel the satiation happening, and that's something that I found was really helpful with it now too. And now if I do have a big session, I can kind of tell how much I can continue to eat. Like I'll eat and I'll stop and be like, should I eat more than this? Like, am I fueled? Did I fill it? Did I hit my marker? And I found that to be really helpful too, because it pushed me to eat, to actually fuel myself.
Right. Well, that's what's kind of interesting about these HYROX competitions. And this will be new for me, where potentially competing later in the day, fueling enough without being overly full in preparation for the competition. So how do you guys kind of prepare for a competition day when the competition is later in the afternoon or evening?
I mean, I don't even, it's more than even just the diet. It's like the mental piece too. Like, what are you spending your time doing during the day to where you can show up 8 hours from now, 10 hours from now, mentally fresh? Like for me, I try to stay away from like the stimulation things, like I try not to look at my phone as, all that much throughout the day. I just want my brain and my mind to be as fresh as possible from like a mental standpoint. There's things you can do too to keep your mind fresh. From a diet perspective, I don't have like one thing that I follow like every time that I race an evening race, but I do find rather than if you wake up and you hit your race in the morning, you can have a big dinner the night before and it can kind of carry you over to where in the morning you might just need a gel or like a little bar, and then you go and hit your race. I have found that I actually just eat normal at dinner, and then the morning of, I actually try to have like a bigger breakfast that carries me over through the day, to where kind of after my breakfast meal, I'm just kind of nibbling the rest of the day, topping myself off with glycogen or whatever. So I just kind of move my last big meal up one versus, if the race were in the morning, versus.
It's more time to digest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Easy carbs, stuff that I know is not going to be sitting there. I try to stay away from fats or big protein meals in the middle of the day. Just things that I know: white rice, peanut butter jelly, peanut butter
PB&Js, baby.
Jelly
PB&Js.
I could go for a PB&J right now. That sounds really good.
I can eat a PB&J and be out the door in 3 minutes. Have
Still
no issues with
peanut butter.
something.
Peanut butter is a little bit slower for me, so I'll try to give a couple hours for something like that. But banana right before I can hit it.
look.
But that's fibrous. I don't know.
I've done donuts before. I know, look, it's not at some point we're here for performance. We're not here to be healthy. And sometimes that donut or gummy bears or whatever gives you that spike that you need to perform at a really high level. So I'm definitely someone who keeps kind of just like unhealthy snacks around, especially like on race day.
Quick sugars,
Yeah.
easy digesting.
Yep.
Have you ever wore the continuous glucose monitor?
Yeah. Yep.
Did you find that interesting?
Kind of. I didn't see much benefit out of it because I would watch my blood sugar spike and then come down. I saw some changes based off of what I was eating, but I had Lane Norton on the podcast, Dr. Lane Norton, and we talked about this. And like, if we have healthy bodies and we train and we exercise, we regularly consume healthy foods and healthy amounts, our body will naturally, blood sugar will go up after a carbohydrate-rich meal, and insulin will be released from the pancreas and it'll bring that blood sugar back down to baseline. And like spikes are okay as long as it comes back to baseline. So I really don't get concerned about trying to keep my blood sugar as low as possible with some of these spikes from meals. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. It's like, okay, now I know that a banana spikes it, so maybe I'll keep that closer to pre-workout, kind of. But yeah, I wasn't sure if I really haven't taken away anything for performance. Some people wear it. Camilla Massa, one of our partners for the like events that we run, she would wear it during her HYROX sessions and would track where the dip was happening.
Interesting.
And that's how she would know where to fuel.
That's actually really smart.
Yeah, and the problem is it's not real time. I think there is a way you can get it real time now. I think there's some sort of app where it can be, you can see where you're at, but it's usually after, right? You do your workout and see, it's like, okay, at 35 minutes, it's where it dipped. But maybe that's a place for it to figure out your fueling. Think you're going to fuel during the HYROX?
Probably not during, but I'll fuel plenty before. Is there an option? Like, how do you consume fluids if you need them during a HYROX? Do you at all?
They do have water.
There's a water table.
Water tables. It's not always in the ideal location where like it's right on the run path and you can kind of grab it as you go. Sometimes it can be like the run's going this way and then the water's like over here and you kind of gotta, veer off 2 or 3 seconds and get it. And it's at that point, I'm just like, the hell with it. But it's there. It's available if you want it. It just might not be the most convenient spot.
The Elite 15 races are nice because they'll give us a table, how they will for
That's
like
different.
the pro marathon athletes where they'll have their bottles.
Yeah.
And that's nice. But you could use the water table, or I think the best bet is to have like a soft flask in a waist belt. If you have like a solution that you want to.
I might be wearing a waist belt this year.
You might try that?
We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know my body pretty well at this point, and like, as long as I front load nutrition prior to that race starting, I won't need water or anything during. Most of my even marathons that I've done, I don't ever stop and get liquid water or anything throughout.
Wow.
Now CIM I did because I could feel some cramps coming on, so I was grabbing electrolytes at every station. But I can go that hour without anything.
And you train in the heat. That's one thing. If like I will try to grab some just for a cooling strategy, just hoping it works. But you're gonna be fine because it's hot down here.
Are people dripping sweat in these competitions? I feel I feel like for some reason all the videos and photos I see, it never looks like everyone's dripping sweat.
By the sled, like I will wear a shirt until the sled because to take on the sweat, just because the way we push the sled, in the past I've been like kind of slipping up it. So I'll wear a shirt before that and take it off after just to manage the sweat a little bit. But by the sled push, 12 minutes in, you're drenched. Yeah, I've been anyway.
What's your heart rate usually sit at this entire effort?
I don't know actually, because I've never worn a heart rate monitor in a race, but I got to imagine it's 170 plus for.
So my anaerobic threshold's around 152. So if I can keep it around there, by the back end it can be at like 160, like the back third, like I'm over it. But because it comes back down, like into farmer's carry, the heart rate drops, like lunges, it'll drop a little bit. So I can go up above it a little bit during the runs. But I'm usually at or just above anaerobic threshold for a lot of it.
What's your heart rate sit at on these easy runs you do?
It was 120. It was 120.
I saw that.
Yeah. I think it's just genetic. I think I would like to say that I have superior fitness because of it, but I think it's genetic.
Yeah, I noticed a lot when you share data, your heart rate's always pretty low.
What's your max?
If I see it at 170, things have gone crazy. But yeah, 120 for zone 2, 122-ish is about where it will be averaged out.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Whereas my max, I can still get it above 190 still. So
heart is jacked. My heart is yoked.
Yeah. My heart is so strong.
Yoked, dude.
Yeah.
So what's the goal with this afternoon session? What is the purpose? What is the intent of today's workout that we're programming?
I mean, I tried to program something for Rich. I knew he wanted some grindy.
We got an important race coming up. We got to feel this thing a little bit more, something longer, something I can sit in for a while.
Yeah.
Walk us through we did nine easy miles this morning.
This is a big day, dude. This is a big day.
It's a big day.
Yeah. So we're gonna do 3 rounds of 20, basically 3 by 25 minute intervals, and each interval will start with a 1 mile run, and we will go then directly into an E2 mom, where we kind of go back and forth between row and ski for 12 minutes, and then we will complete each set with a 1 mile run on the back end. So it's 1 mile up front, right into an E2 mom, and then a 1 mile on the back end. And then we will repeat that for 3 rounds total. But each round, the E2 mom piece will change stations. So in the first round, it'll be row and ski. The second round, it'll be farmers and burpee broad jumps. And then the last round will be lunges and wall balls. So you kind of get the fresh piece up front. You get the run piece up front. Legs are going to be feeling good, and you kind of get a little punch in the middle, and then you got to go run on fatigued legs at the end of it. So it's a good little blend of everything.
Mm-hmm. In between the rounds, are you doing, because it starts with a 1 mile, ends with a 1 mile. So between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, is it 2 miles straight?
No, we can do like a quick pause or a break or something like that. So you're
saying after that second mile into, would the middle be a 2 mile? Oh, I don't know. I guess we didn't think about that. We could break it.
We didn't think about that.
We still need to workshop this thing a little bit.
Well, initially it was going to be 2 miles up front,
right,
and then right into the E2 mom, and we would just do that for 3 rounds: 2 miles E2 mom, 2 miles E2 mom, 2 miles E2 mom. But then we were thinking, man, it might make sense to do
a little more compromised.
Running a little bit on end. But if that might not work out. We'll see.
We'll figure it out. It's just sitting at a higher effort. 20 to 25 minutes of an interval is long enough. They have to respect it, but short enough that you can kind of punch it a little bit.
And honestly, I kind of want your heart rate to spike a little bit more on the E2 mom when we get into the stations. I want the heart rate to spike more than it did on the run. And then when you get on the run out of it, you need to settle it back down, get back into your rhythm. And then we're just basically going to keep repeating that process.
What are you going to try to hold on these 1 miles?
I mean, we should make a standard, right? You can't be slower than 6 minutes.
That's why
if you're slower than 6 minutes, you gotta.
That's why I want to do
the workout.
That's why I was thinking we do complete in 25 minutes this work.
Yeah,
and
we could do that too.
And then whatever it is, you have the rest to 2 to 3 minutes of rest. But yeah, I think I want to start around 550 and cut down as it progresses and try to find a sweet spot where that is.
Yeah, I mean, in any session that you do, especially a HYROX workout, you're gonna want to start a little bit conservative and build into the session. You always want to be going forward. You never want to be going backwards. A lot of people end up, not only messing up their training, but messing up the race by going out a little bit too hot, So we're always looking for even when mile repeats and stuff, you're looking for the best average. You're not looking for the best one rep that you
Right.
can do. You know, like you want the sum of all parts. So taking a little conservative approach. And if you feel good later in the workout, we can always push the last round like a little bit more. You know, you want to have something to give later in the workout. You don't want to just be dying, you know? So, be smart out there, be smart, pace yourself.
Yes.
You know, and sometimes you got to trial by fire, learn the hard way. You know, whenever I'm coaching somebody, that's usually the best way to learn is, you know what? Go blow up. And I guarantee you'll learn the next time.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned that way.
Yeah, totally. For sure.
Well, guys, I appreciate you making the trip out here to Austin, Texas. Come on the pod. I've been a big fan of RMR training podcast since I started training for HYROX, and appreciate all the content you guys put out there. And it's been extremely helpful. So
Appreciate that, man. Super fun being here and kind of seeing this whole operation. It's inspiring, dude.
appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for letting us come on and tell our story, and we appreciate you being in the space, man. We're excited to see you in Dallas. We're all throwing down.
We need to talk about doubles too. We could do some doubles in Houston.
I'm down. It's gonna be fun. Yeah, ever since I started listening to your guys' podcast, and then I heard you guys talking shit on me, I wanted to bring you out here to Austin.
There's going to be a special surprise out there in
Let's
this
see
gym.
what these guys are all about.
Like, come on out. Come on out.
We'll show you.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Nick.
Later, guys.